This episode of Chucky Radio is a throwback episode. We're going back to my late teens, and I'm going to have one of my best friends from high school come and help tell the stories, the crazy trips to Mexico. I hope you enjoy. Welcome to Chucky Radio. So the first thing I want to talk about, my buddy from high school, he refers to me by the name Carlos. And I just wanted to clarify, I was born Carlos. My name from birth is Carlos. All through school and into the early college years, going by Carlos. And when I left Texas and moved to California with a couple of my buddies, I made a decision out there to translate my Spanish name of Carlos to Charles. Got a little bit of grief about it, but for the most part, everybody was accepting. And I just want to explain, from my perspective, not disrespecting the history, the heritage behind my name, my family. My parents came from Colombia, South America. I was born here. I grew up in Texas, and I had to deal with the stereotype of having a Hispanic name. And I dealt with it. I mean, there is racism, and especially when you're young, I was called a spick, I was called a wetback, but I had all the privileges of having a father who was successful. He was a successful doctor, a very caring mother that was always there for us. And so I had also made the decision when I transferred schools to California that I was going to go into finance. And eventually I knew I would become a stockbroker, which is what I did. And in that field, you make a lot of calls and you introduce yourself by your name. And for me, I didn't feel like a Carlos. And I just felt being in Southern California, just like being in Texas, there's just an immediate stigma. And I wanted to level the playing field. So I just felt, for me professionally, it would just sound better going by Charles. But my friends, I still have some that call me Carlos. Most of the friends that I grew up with, who I know today, who I still hang out with, they accepted Charles, but they morphed it into Chucky. So most of my closest friends call me Chucky. And hence this is where Chucky Radio came from. So let me get my buddy Tim on the line and we'll tell you a little bit about these crazy trips to Mexico. So I have my buddy here on the phone from high school. Tim, how's it going, buddy?
Good, Carlos. How you doing, man?
Oh, doing great, man. And so I just explained how, little background on my name. Again, you call me Carlos. I love that. It's actually kind of, it's interesting. It's almost nostalgic for me because I've been going by Charles for so long. And just someone to call me Carlos again, it's like, wow, it kind of puts me back in that time period, right?
Oh yeah, well that's the only thing I remember you by.
Right. I mean, and there's that weird separation. I mean, there's that weird separation from like growing up in Arlington and starting at University of Texas in Arlington and then finally making the break, the big break, the big move to California. And then that was really kind of a major turning point in my life. And it was when I decided to translate from, Carlos to Charles. And so right. It was almost perfect in a sense, like it was two completely different periods of time in my life. So this episode, Tim, you and I have some stories to tell.
Yes, we do.
And just to remind me, I'm trying to think, when did we first meet, by the way?
We had a class together when, I was a senior and you were a junior. Right. And was it algebra or geometry or something? I can't remember what it was.
Yeah. I mean, it was in high school. we were taking a class, and then we just kind of connected. And you had transferred in, right?
Yeah, I transferred in just the year before, but didn't really have a lot of friends. You know, Texas is full of those cliques.
Oh my!
And
High school was so cliquish, right?
Oh yeah, and the high school that we went to was huge. So
Yeah.
you know, there was a lot of cliques and not a lot of room for new people to come into play. But the only way I made friends was, you know, playing football that first year I came in.
Right. I remember that. You were an athlete and you played football and you'd made some friends like that. So you and I kind of both had a passion for wanting to travel. We both wanted to, you know, explore some cool different parts of the world. And for us, the exotic place to go was Mexico. And so
it was inexpensive.
It was inexpensive. It was, you know, it was a complete, I mean,
an adventure. We were looking for adventure.
So the first trip that we did, which was the crazy, you know, the mischievous youth type trip, was you were graduating from high school and I was the year before. Your parents had basically given you a graduation gift of being able to go to Club Med, Mexico.
Yeah.
And so I remember you and I went down there, and of course, the nice thing about Club Med is, you know, for two kids, 17, 18 years old, we're in a completely contained environment. And so, you know, you're in a foreign country, but you feel safe. The beaches are beautiful. You know, you still get exposed to the culture and everything. But for us, of course, this is probably one of our first experiences to really be away from, you know, any authoritative figure. And we're going to freaking lose our minds, right?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, do you remember what all we did during that trip? I remember windsurfing and doing stuff like that, right, at the club?
Yeah, we windsurfed. We had the lasers that we rented, the little sailboats.
That's right.
We got out, and you and I had never been into the ocean before, sailing.
Oh.
Because we always used your little, you know, your Hobie cat out in the lakes, but this was our first experience sailing in the ocean.
Out in the ocean. And the cool thing about Club Med is everything's included. So you didn't actually have to rent anything. You just had to check it out.
Yeah.
So we were able to check out windsurfers, check out the sailboats, just kind of like anything that you wanted to do, you would just plan in advance and you check it out and you get to use it for a few hours, whatever time they blocked out, right?
Yeah.
And so I remember each night we'd do it up a little bit. We'd be drinking, we'd be partying, but the most memorable experience of that trip, well, I don't know if it's memorable because I think half the night we don't remember.
Yeah, exactly.
Was the
and
last?
And it progressed. Each night we partied a little harder each night that we were there. We felt more comfortable, and we just kept going.
We would pace ourselves pretty well.
Yeah.
I gotta admit. So I think on trips now, I don't pace myself as well as I did when I was young. But we progressively ended up, you know, getting a little bit more comfortable, like you said, partying. And then that final night, I'll never forget, because there's like a group dinner almost, like everybody would eat around the same time because the meals were included.
Yeah, and there was like 10-person round tables that we all sat at, and you just sat wherever there was an open spot.
Right. And so I just remember, like, we went to dinner, and then there was like a little bar scene we would go to, and you just would start, you know, drinking, and, you know, you talk to people at dinner, you talk to people in the bar scene, and you would get beads, right? We had to pay for the beads. So the one thing about Club Med was it didn't include alcohol. Like they were good about like at least some level of management of not letting people get completely obliterated.
It was included in dinner. They would actually put a couple of wine right there at your table, and then you had a couple of glasses of wine. You ate dinner, and then you would leave. Right.
And so you had the drinks at dinner. Oh, you could do wine or beer because we would drink beer.
Yes.
And so they would provide you the alcohol at dinner, But then once after dinner and once you're in their little bar scene area, then you had to use your beads, which you had to pay for, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so us being me still in high school, you just graduating high school. I mean, we were on limited funds. And so I think we only had so many beads to spend. And so at one point, there were some people that we had met that had told us, hey, come back by our room later in the evening. And so
yeah.
You remember this, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so the thing these kind of moments really sear into your memory is I just remember we walk into this room and there's just massive bottle of tequila on the table. And you and I just look at each other and we're just like, tequila!
And we were ready to party.
Oh my God. I mean, we grabbed that bottle and you and I just remember chugging. I mean, it was like, it was free, right? It's like we didn't have to use our beads anymore. We got basically free hard alcohol. And
and everybody at that party was definitely encouraging that as well.
Oh my God, they were like, and they were older than us, so I think for them it was almost like a little bit like, haha, these kids are going to really feel this. But what was funny is I think we outlasted everybody too. I mean, that's that.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what time we actually hit the bed, but it was late.
It was ridiculously late. I mean, we were staying out pretty late each night anyway, but this night I think, of course, everything's a blur beyond, I think that about the third or fourth time I was chugging that bottle. And so the next thing I remember is waking up with this incredible hangover and we have to go to breakfast and we're just like dragging. We're leaving that day. We get to the breakfast table. We're eating breakfast. We're just feeling like crap, but we're keeping it together. And this lady starts talking to us at the table, right? You remember this?
Oh, yeah.
And so the funny thing is she starts complaining about how there's these people partying last night and how
it was so loud she couldn't sleep and she went on.
Yeah, and then she's like, and they kept yelling this guy's name, Carlos. And she was like, if I find this Carlos guy, I'm going to kill him.
And you and I just shut up.
Our lips were buttoned. We were just like, yeah, man, that sounds crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, then at some point in time, somebody on the table said that what time the bus was leaving, and we looked at our watch and we're like, oh my gosh.
We're like, oh crap.
We had stuff scattered all over
We hadn't even packed yet.
I know. And we had like literally 5 minutes before we had to be on the bus.
So we're now scrambling. We get back to the room. We're throwing everything into our bags. We're packing. I mean, we probably left stuff. Who knows? And our only mission was if we miss that bus, we miss our flight and we're totally screwed, right? And this is the shuttle bus because this Club Med was about half an hour, I remember, from the airport. And so they had their own little shuttle bus, but it was like a good sized bus because, Club Med's housed a lot of people.
It was a 1960 something Greyhound or something like that.
The thing was ancient.
Yeah.
And so we get onto this bus. We barely make it. We're the last people to get on the bus. Like somehow miraculously we make it onto the bus to get to the airport. And I just remember it was the worst bus ride of my life.
Yeah, mine too. I mean, I wanted to puke before I got on the bus because of the hangover.
Yeah.
And then we were forced to sit in the very back.
Oh my. And
the diesel fumes just engulfed the entire back of the bus.
It was horrible. I never smelled diesel like that in my life. And you're, like you said, you're already nauseous, and to be engulfed in diesel fumes like that just added insult to injury. And so I think I was 3 shades of green in the back of that bus, and it was the longest 30-minute ride of my life. I could not wait. And, I mean, you would think after an experience like that, like you and I would have sworn off drinking. We would have sworn off tequila. Like,
oh, I did that morning.
Well, of course, that day we swore it all off. And then, the next couple nights when we're back and we're telling our stories of going to Mexico, of course, we're drinking again.
Yeah.
So then the following year, so obviously we didn't learn our lesson on drinking tequila because the following year we had just decided to plan a trip down to Cancun. It was like a 4-day weekend or something that we just it was like a long weekend type deal. I remember there was some great specials and you and I were just like, hey, let's go back down to Mexico. And we had that special that Mexicana Airlines had that special where you buy one ticket, you get one free. Oh, right.
And it was $200 for a ticket. So you and I were like, dude, $100. We both get to go to Cancun for a weekend.
Half price tickets. And I remember it was part of a package because we also got a hotel. Now, there was like the hotels out on the beach, the little island of Cancun, and then there's the downtown hotels. And of course, we're like, hell, we're going to freaking, it was so cheap. I think it ended up being like $20 a night for the hotel room. Yeah, if that, when you put it in the package. And so we're like, done. I mean, we can just, take a cab or do whatever and go to the beach, but we don't mind staying in town. And so we get down to Cancun, and I don't remember, is this like the first or second night?
I think it was the second night we were there.
Right. So it was like the second night we're there, and we go to have dinner. And so, we decide, because we would typically start in town. There were some great little restaurants and stuff. It was a little less touristy in town. So you'd find like better deals. And then you could go out to the clubs out on the beach, out in the island side. And so we sit down to go to dinner. And the one thing that these guys would do, it's a great tactic. You remember this, right? They would do poppers. So while you're having dinner, you get free tequila poppers. And so the popper was, they would put tequila in it, and then they would put squirt. Yep, you remember that. And so the squirt is like a lemon lime drink. It's almost like a 7-Up, but it was kind of like, to me, it was almost like a mix between 7-Up and Mountain Dew, right?
Yeah.
And so they would take that and then they would slam it on the table and it would fizz up and you'd have to shoot it. And because of the squirt and the carbonation and everything, that stuff would just go down so smoothly. And so again, here's, Chucky and Tim, or Carlos at the time, and Tim, it's like, free alcohol, we're going to capitalize. And so we kept calling the guy over. Like, we just kept saying, hey, come back over here. And so he kept doing poppers. And I don't know if you remember this, but my turning point was I had a really good buzz on, and you kind of get to that point where it's like no bullshit anymore. And the guy comes over, I call him over, and he's like, hey, give us another popper. And so he comes over, and he does the popper, and I pretend like I'm going to grab the shot off the table, but instead I swipe the bottle out of his hand. And I start chugging the straight tequila from the bottle. Again, just like the style of Club Med the year before, we're like, screw it, let's cut to the chase, let's just chug tequila. Never a good idea.
No.
And so we finish dinner, and they're like, yeah, you come back here to our club. They had their little nightclub behind the restaurant. And so, that was kind of part of their deal, I guess, is that, they'd give you free drinks during dinner, and then you would go to their little nightclub, and now you had to pay for drinks.
Right. They get you worked up, get you lubed up, and get you in there.
It was a little crafty system they had, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And so we get back there, and there's like some other people there, and we were so wasted. I think at one point we just like offered to buy everybody drinks, And we're just like, because we're in Mexico and, everything's pretty cheap in Mexico anyway. And so at one point, we're like, it's 2 a.m. now. So we'd end up spending like the whole night here. And they bring us our bill. And the bill is like $200.
Yeah.
And you and I are
like looking at it, we're like, there's no freaking way. Even if we bought everybody, because tequila shots back in those days were in Mexico were like 50 cents. They were dirt cheap.
Yeah, I mean,
and the dinner we had was like $4.50.
Yeah,
so there was no way our bill was $200.
I mean, even if you bought expensive drinks, even if you're buying tequila, like premium tequila drinks, tops you were paying was $2-3 a drink. Tops. Okay. So there was no way we had put down like 100 drinks, No. And so we're just like, we don't have this. Cause of course also the deal there was you had to pay with cash, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Not too many places, especially in town, took credit cards even back in those days.
Right. And so we're sitting there arguing with the guy, and the guy's like, no, you owe this. No, you guys bought drinks for everybody, da-da-da. And you and I are just like wasted. And we're just like, well, we don't have it, Well,
you were a little worse than I was because you were chugging that bottle. And I was telling the guys, like, bring me what I ordered.
Right.
And he wouldn't do it. He would just give me a total amount. So he wouldn't give me an itemized bill.
Oh, my.
And I'm like, there's no way we drank this much. There's no way. And he kept arguing with me. And then you bailed.
Well, so here it's a foggy memory, but I do recall that as we sat, and we were kind of in front of the restaurant because we kind of made our way from the club part back to the front to where like the restaurant, and now we're kind of like out in front of the restaurant, almost on the sidewalk. And at one point we're like arguing with the guy, like, okay, the only way we can pay for this is we got to go back to our room and get cash. And the guy's like, okay, you guys go get one of you guys go get your cash. And so At one point the deal was one of us had to stay. And since you were the more coherent one, you were like, here, I'll go get the cash. And they're like, okay, we'll keep your amigo here. And in my brain, in my pickled tequila brain, I'm like, I'm not going to be held hostage. And so I just decided to bolt, like something clicked, like run now. And I'll never forget, because you described to me how I looked running away is that I take off running, but it was kind of like this like weird slow motion run, like a really wasted person.
And you were.
And I was totally wasted. And so now you're there. I've now run away. You have no idea where I've gone. And I recall you telling me this, but you had to negotiate. And what did you have to give these guys in order to finally let you go?
Oh, I gave him my Wet n Wild ID. When I worked at Wet n Wild, I had my employee ID. So I told him how importante this is.
So you were like, you basically are showing them this ID from your, working as a youth, as a lifeguard at a Wet n Wild, water park. And you're explaining to them how important this is. This is a very valuable, very important ID from the United States. And
I was telling him I'd lose my job if I didn't have this. So I would definitely come back for this.
And so you leave them your Wet n Wild ID that you didn't give a crap about. And then you took off. And then what happened at that point?
I went looking for you. I figured you went back to the hotel, but you didn't go the direction of the hotel. So I figured you probably doubled back. But I went the same way you did, and I couldn't find you. So I went back to the hotel. You weren't there. So I went back out, and I'm like walking all over town. And it's like 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning.
And here's the weird part. Like I said, it was a fog for me, but the last thing I do remember was after I had run away and I looked back and you were still back there arguing. I don't know why, but I got down to the end of that street and there was a cab there and I jumped into the cab. And I recall I had no money because we had given the guy at that point everything we had on us. I think maybe between the two of us, we had like $40-50. And so we had given them all our cash. And so all I recall was being in a cab with absolutely no money and the cab driver taking off. And everything beyond that, I have no idea. And so you spend the night looking for me.
Yeah.
And this is where, like, serious, we have guardian angels looking over us because I do not have any idea what happened that night, but it could have been bad. And thank God, all I do recall was I wake up to a guy kicking me. And I'm like, what's going on? Like, I felt this, like, thumping. And I'm like, just waking up. And as I open my eyes, there's this old Mexican guy kicking me, telling me, get out, get out. And I have absolutely no idea where I'm at. And and back then, you recall, we would dress Miami Vice style, right? So
oh, yeah.
I had this nice little white jacket. I had this gray tank top underneath, all kind of Rico Suave look going on. And I just remember like opening my eyes. I'm looking around. I'm literally I had been laying on a marble floor in the middle of a hotel lobby. And it wasn't our hotel.
Yeah, which is probably the best place you could have ended up.
Exactly. And I do recall I had gotten a present from my parents. I think it was a graduation gift, actually. It was a really nice gold choker. And that gold choker was gone. And so I figured that's probably how I paid for the cab. Yeah. That's the only thing I could figure. And so as I get up and this guy's basically telling me to get out of the lobby, it's like 6 a.m. And I stumble out of the lobby of that hotel and onto the street. And I just remember it's like really bright, I could just barely open my eyes. My head's pounding. And there's this little Mexican kid following me. Those little kids that would sell chicle and stuff?
Chicle.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he's like following me and he keeps saying something to me. And I'm like, kid, I need to find the Hotel Americano. And the kid kept going, it's over there. And I'm like, what? And I'm like, no, just the Hotel Americano. And finally he's like, Senor, it's right there. And I open my eyes and I'm literally right in front of our hotel. I had somehow passed out in a lobby of a hotel that was across the street from our hotel. And so, somehow obviously took a wrong turn. So then I go into our hotel. I go up to our room. I don't even have a key to get in. I knock on the door. You come to the door.
Dude, I was half expecting the cops.
Right, exactly. I was just like, hey, and you like look at me, Carlos, and you like give me this big hug. I'm like, oh man, hey, what's up, dude? And
you were like, where the hell have I been? And I was like, you're asking me? I've been looking for you all night.
And you were like, you were happy to see me, but at the same time, you were kind of pissed. Like, what the hell happened to you?
Yeah.
And I'm like, dude, I have no clue. And I told you the little bit I could remember. And yes, after that experience, I think I did swear off tequila for like years. Because that was probably the worst tequila hangover of my entire life. I think I just crashed and slept the rest of that day.
Well, we had to because we didn't get any sleep.
Oh my God, that was nuts.
I can't believe we're not dead from that one.
I mean, me especially, right? I mean, that was just ridiculous. Blackout in Mexico, be at the mercy of some Mexican cab driver. I mean,
yeah, and me, a white guy walking around Mexico. and
trying to find
back away from the tourism areas. And I'm walking through these areas looking for you at 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning.
No kidding, dude. Anyway, yeah, that could have turned into a very bad story so easily, and thank God we survived.
Yeah, no kidding.
So the lesson here, kind of looking back, I have to say, we had some crazy times, and there's definitely some guardian angels looking over us because things could have gone horribly wrong. But
Absolutely.
the thing I realize, kind of looking back on these events and doing these stupid, crazy things as youth, we're 18 and under, is these were valuable lessons in our lives, right? I mean, you kind of felt like you got that out of your system. You kind of felt like, wow, I dodged a bullet. For me, I look back and I'm like, to do that in Mexico, in downtown, and there's some pretty sketchy areas around there at that time.
Oh, yeah.
And so, you just kind of realize you gotta be careful. But I mean, this is part of growing up, right? I mean, making these kind of mistakes, doing these kind of stupid things, and we can look back at it now and we can laugh about it, and really feel fortunate that nothing really bad happened.
Right.
Yeah. And
we learned from it.
We did. We learned from it. Anyway, Tim, thank you so much for helping me tell these stories of our mischievous youth.
No problem, man.
All right, buddy. Well, you have yourself an awesome day.
You too, man.
I hope you enjoyed that episode of Chucky Radio. If you could please subscribe to my podcast. You can find me on most podcast services, from Apple Podcasts to Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, etc. And I would also appreciate the feedback. Please rate the podcast and make any comments. Thank you, and take care.